Don't worry.
Okay. Take a breath. I'm good. Okay.
Faster than pizza.
All right. My name is Daisha Ashwin, and I will be doing my presentation on civil disobedience. This is a picture of a man standing in front of a law enforcement, or sitting in front of a law enforcement vehicle. And it says, civil disobedience, sometimes you gotta wonder if a statement is, or making a statement is really worth it. Another thing I would like to point out is a quote by General George S. Patton Jr. He said, "It is better to live for something, or better to fight for something than to live for nothing." Now, people have different interpretations of civil disobedience, and I would like you to keep both of these statements in mind as I conduct this presentation. Civil disobedience has been included in many major events in this country and has evolved over the years. Throughout my presentation, I will be giving 3 well-known examples of where civil disobedience was involved. The Boston Tea Party was one of them, and the nonviolent acts of civil disobedience, and how the colonists stood up for their independence. The Civil Rights Movement, and I will be discussing Martin Luther King and Malcolm X's point of view and how civil disobedience differed between the two. And lastly, Occupy Wall Street. It started as a peaceful protest and quickly escalated with violence, and I'll also give some examples of local events as well. Civil disobedience is a big topic on the news, and it also caught my interest in U.S. history class. And I also received information from Gabriel Lumwich on the Civil Rights Movement. The Boston Tea Party was a direct result of what colonists had viewed as unfair laws, regulations, and violated rights. Without the use of violence, the colonists were able to bring attention to their displeasure by dumping tea into the harbor. This was an act of protest because they did not want to pay taxes to Britain, and they believed that they should only pay taxes to their self-elected officials. The act of civil disobedience displayed was a major factor that led to the Revolutionary War. And this is also a good example on how change can be accomplished without the use of violence and still bring change to the society. This picture I actually took in Boston when I was visiting, and is a portion of where the Tea Party took place and what it looks like today. The Civil Rights Movement was from 1955 to 1968. It was a major turning point in this country's history, and it was long overdue. Though many had differing views on how to accomplish equality between blacks and whites, Martin Luther King displayed civil disobedience in a non-violent manner. One example of his conquest was the Million Man March, which was on August 28, 1963, and he had over 20,000 people stand beside him. Now, unlike Dr. King, Malcolm X had a different point of view when it came to making a point. He was actually for segregation, no limits, and violence. And according to Loonridge, one of the main points he had in some of his speeches was equality would destroy not only black men, but white men as well. And both these men display, protest, and strong leadership make civil disobedience stronger. And lastly, Occupy Wall Street. The movement in America was at the beginning much of a libertarian movement, free of social issues, and aimed more towards government, corporation, and private industries, bailouts, ending lobbyism, etc. Occupy Wall Street at the beginning was a peaceful protest, and it started in New York City, and then message got out publicly, and citizens all over the world started forming their own forms of Occupy. One example is Occupy Denver. They're constantly camping out at Civic Center Park, right across from the state's capital. destroying property, etc. And another thing I found out last night, one of the guys that were involved in the burning of City Hall in Green Mountain Falls was one of the starters of Occupy Colorado Springs. So I found that kind of interesting. And though it borders on social inequality and was not for that wasn't for their original intentions, more younger Americans with liberal views would soon join the movement, and its idea and causes would soon change. But civil disobedience was its original goal. Since September 2011, 6,400 plus arrests, 150 plus injuries, 24 deaths, and numerous sexual assaults and business closures have been reported. Now, despite their beliefs, they have introduced young people to the social and political spectrum. And although Occupy has its pros and cons, their actions portray civil disobedience. And also they claim that their First Amendment is being violated, and really it has nothing to do with their speech. We hear what they're saying, however, they're still breaking the law in the process. So in conclusion, there are numerous ways to view civil disobedience. There are nonviolent, violent, right, wrong, mutual acts, as I've just presented. Much of it just depends on your perspective. So the Boston Tea Party was a form of nonviolence during the act, yet led to the war, which benefited us in the end. The Civil Rights Movement had two virtual leaders, yet Dr. King's acts of civil disobedience influenced black and white equality. In Occupy Wall Street protest, we are the 99%, but are they going about it the right way? So we all have different aspects when it comes to civil disobedience. This is a difficult topic to keep neutral while presenting. Yet I hope you as an audience can reflect on what you would do if something you believed in was violated in some way. Would you stand up for what you believed in, and go to the extent of civil disobedience, or would you sit back and let it take its course and do nothing? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's just something to think about amongst yourselves. Thank you. And are there any questions?
Y'all just need love.